2026 academic year begins and NSFAS says it is ready to fund hundreds of thousands of students at universities and TVET colleges. More than 890,000 applications have been processed with more than 600,000 students confirmed. But thousands still have incomplete applications and time is running out to appeal. So let's talk about the way forward with NSFAS spokesperson Ishmael Mnisi. Ishmael, good morning to you. Again, compliments of the season. Thank you very much for your time. We started that intro off with the registrations or the applications that are kind of still in limbo. How are we going to energize the process to give people closure on where they stand, particularly with regard to the appeal process?
Well, thank you very much, Iman, for the time. Look, we have been communicating to students who have not been successful in their applications and, ensuring that they apply for the appeals within 30 days. From the day we sent results to them that they are not successful, the dates for their application for appeal kick-started then. So we give them 30 days for them to ramp up their applications, and the appeals button still is available for them to apply for appeal. However, after 30 days, the appeals button disappears. Therefore, they would have missed an opportunity for them to apply for an appeal. But we have also another category of students whose application are incomplete. And we are giving them an opportunity for them to submit the necessary documentation and information that NSFAS needs for us to be able to complete that process. It's solely dependent on students' a quick response. And we are on our part doing everything possible to communicate that message to them. And we understand very well, Iman, that we were in the holiday season and majority of them might not have been checking their messages. But now that we are back, we're hoping that they will immediately respond to NSFAS before the dates lapses.
So let's talk about guarantees, Ishmael, that NSFAS can give eligible students, so students who have been engaged and are in the system and in process, to ensure that they will not be turned away or forced to deregister because of things outside of their control, like administrative backlogs.
Iman, for all the students that NSFAS has confirmed to be a recipient of our bursary, and those that will confirm to be recipient of our loan, we will not falter in making sure that that information filtrates to the institutions where they are registered. All that we're asking of them to do is for them to get in touch with their universities and give them the necessary information that, by the way, would have sent to institutions. So at the time they even arrive, the institutions would know that they are qualified NSFAS recipients. So we don't expect that there will be glitches in as far as our engagement between ourselves and the universities themselves. So all that we expect is for students whose applications are not yet completed to make sure that they do complete those before they even go to institutions, so that we have a seamless process of administering their applications for 2026.
Let's talk about the accommodation issue, which has also been one of the problematic areas identified over time. Student accommodation, one of your biggest pressure points. We've seen in the past students sleeping in libraries and also facing eviction. How confident are you and NSFAS, Ishmael, that this new centralized accommodation framework is actually going to work practically? And, you know, what recourse or safeguards are there if the private providers and the institutions don't comply with the student accommodation provision?
Well, the review that we have on student accommodation has been heavily canvassed with our institutions. We are in unison in as far as these changes that we want to bring forth. Now, firstly, we want to align the accommodation dates, including the opening, the closing, and the moving in and the moving out of students with the academic calendar, to make sure that all sectors that are involved, including private accommodation providers, they understand when students will be expected in, when they will be expected to move out of the accommodation. That same information will be shared with all the stakeholders that are involved. But secondly, we are upgrading our accommodation portal to make sure that when a student applies for student accommodation, they must go to those accommodation establishments, particularly the private ones, which are accredited. This will eliminate a lot of time wastages in the process, and also it will assist us to make sure that students get accommodation which is accredited, which the safety standards are guaranteed, where we've made our assessment of those establishments, and we're encouraging students to use those kind of accommodation establishment to avoid unnecessary wastage and disappointments in the process. But also, we are using our data-driven reconciliation process to make sure that the payment system will be seamless in 2026. We know that when we receive data from especially private accommodation providers, due to the intricacies of the system, we would not be able to pay their allowances on time because of the duration that they take for them to submit. But now with our data-driven reconciliation process, we will know how much we're supposed to be paying a particular accommodation provider, because we would be having an agreement between that student and the provider from the beginning of the year. And lastly, Iman, in as far as student accommodation is concerned, we are trying to move into a process where NSFAS manage the payment functionality within NSFAS. Currently, we are still using third parties to do so, but we want to eliminate all possibilities of wastages of time by managing the system ourselves, so that between the accommodation providers and NSFAS, we can move swiftly in dealing with any other challenges that might arise in the process.
Before I ask you to just explain and tease out the concept of this data-driven process that you say will maximize and optimize efficiencies in disbursements, let's just quickly talk about these third parties that you've been using. I mean, how much money do you spend to these third parties to do the work you say you're now going to do yourself?
Well, in terms of the agreement that we have currently, they take 5% of the revenue that NSFAS would pay to accommodation providers. So that percentage share is spread amongst the 4 accommodation third-party agents that we are using as NSFAS.
Okay, all right. Let's go then. I want to come back. And again, I think over the next weeks, as we begin to see the success or the challenges within the system that you're promising is going to work in a much better fashion than it did in 25 and the years prior, we'll have more conversations around monies and the operational spend of NSFAS. Let's talk about the data-driven reconciliation process you talked about, which is going to eliminate some of the problems we've experienced in the past, and students specifically have experienced. What does that look like? What is that?
Well, what will be happening is we're going to have a data sets that will be emanating from the agreements that students would have signed with landlords. And the basis of that data that would have constructed, we will then know which accommodation provider must be paid which amount every month, because we know the students that would be residing in those establishments. Even if there are movements in between, we would be able to establish that on time, so that we know that a student X has moved from this establishment to the next establishment, and that then this data will make it easy for us to process the payments. Currently, what has been happening, Iman, is that accommodation providers will submit invoices or claims every month, and those claims would differ from one month to the other, which makes it very difficult for NSFAS to ascertain whether these claims are legitimate or not. But also because we will then be using accredited accommodation providers.
Right.
We would know from our system how much that accommodation provider must be paid. Remember, we are grading them from A to E. So the amount that must go to each and every accommodation provider would have been predetermined. So we would not be thumb-sucking in terms of how much it is going to be, because that accommodation provider might not be accredited. In this instance, they would have been accredited, we would be knowing what is due to them.
Yeah.
And if there are any movements, we would know in advance that there has been such a movement. And where that movement might not be declared on time, this is where we are going to have a dispute with the accommodation providers before we can even process the claims.
All right, well, we'll keep you and NSFAS close over the next couple of days. Ishmael Mnisi, thanks for sharing that clarity, promising students and families that there's going